Chapter 1. Introduction. We are always upon a new time in evolution. Until the last century, the changes were subtle techniques of quarry, limited in comparison to today's time passage express. Now we are approaching the realization that our reality really is a holographic projection with quantum values. The only way I could ever begin to understand the secrets of the evolution of the universe was to understand the secrets of the human body and its related functions. Not just the physical structure in all its attributes, but the physical and emotional energy, perceptive powers of consciousness, and hopefully the spiritual intent. It's definitely an experimental process, wherein the intuition becomes the guidepost through both the holographic chaos and the corresponding balancing harmony. For some, it's quiet meditative process, but for me, it's rolling up my shirt sleeves and getting involved with life. In the hologram, everything is the same, no matter how small you divide it, even down to the smallest perceptive size, called the Planck length, which we will study later in the text. Starting with the Big Bang, postulated by Monsignor George Henry Joseph Edward Lemaitre, July 17, 1894 to June 20, 1966, who was a Roman Catholic priest, professor of physics, and astronomer at the Catholic University of Leuven, we will examine what is meant by some in the statement of "in God's image." As you will see, it is quite interesting to see how many of our greatest scientific minds started out in some sort of an Episcopalian or other religious heritage. When we begin to look at and understand human behavior and why there are elite forces that have, for millennia, tried to control the world, a weakness in true spirituality begins to become apparent. Because of the changes of the ages, we are now moving into the age of Aquarius, where during our precession of the equinox around the central star, Alcyone, in the Pleiades, consciousness, located within the hydrogen atom, is shifting into our present awareness. Manifesting itself through societal paranoia, this will quickly begin to shift, exposing these dark force characters, with their medieval ideas, onto center stage, and soon they will be the ones in the fishbowl for all the world to see. No false leadership, manipulation of the true facts, secret doctrines, cover-ups, disinformation campaigns, or false holographic projections are going to stop our true material and spiritual evolution into the golden age of perfect harmony and natural bonding with nature in all that lies within the realm of life as we know it. Now, it is time to realize and understand our limitless abilities and to excel in unison with all life forms. Consciousness is becoming a commodity. Everywhere you look, in everything that you read, the word consciousness, or conscious of, or even unconscious, is printed or mentioned. Did you ever ask yourself what the true meaning of consciousness is, or what it means? If I were to say to you, I'm going to raise my consciousness, would that have a connotation, say, of placing something on a lift and moving it towards the sky? Possibly, it might have a metaphysical ring, leaving you to believe that raising consciousness gave you some secret inner meaning of a word, an object, or a place. Or again, the whole idea of consciousness is just a big turnoff, because no one seems aware enough to go beyond what you already know and have experienced. Consciousness affects events. In experiencing consciousness, in its definitions and applications, I have noticed from my own viewpoint consciousness is explained somewhat as a series of bookshelves placed one upon the other. The lower consciousness corresponds to the lowest shelf, and higher consciousness is the highest shelf. So, when listening to others explain how conscious a person is, it's like hearing which shelf they are perched upon. The Western world, especially, is highly guilty of this scenario. Eastern religions tend to look at this a little differently. What I would like to do is present a compromising picture of consciousness in such a way that you can relate to it in everything that you do, every thought that crosses your mind, and to be able to find a meaning in every event, every person, or relationship you come across in your sojourn in this, your present life. The method of observation and result of action therein is called Kriya. The next thing, what I would call a prerequisite to consciousness, is attitude. A positive or ascending attitude is usually the best scenario to approach anything. In this case, the definition of an ascending attitude is a rising feeling of wellness when confronting a person or situation. If the situation is potentially a negative one, then one needs to discipline one's attitude in order to process the lesson of the confrontation. If it's there and you're involved, denial of your presence is not an option. It's not always easy to maintain a positive attitude. For example, during the time of the full moon, the surface tension of the body contracts. This causes normal body functions necessary for a happy, balanced behavior to malfunction. If there is a situation of malnutrition in the body, and emotional trauma is in the offering, or you have just, in general, received some bad news that you really did not feel you needed to hear at that moment, having an ascending attitude would probably not be a readily available option. In countries such as Turkey, crimes of passion committed during a full moon have a greater leniency in their punishment than those crimes committed with the moon in a lesser phase. These laws are, in some cases, over 1,000 years old. Many other nations are aware of lunar and planetary effects on the personality and its actions. The field of astrology delves into one of 12 different approaches to any given situation. These approaches are called signs. They are broken down further into 4 categories of earth, air, fire, and water. The varied approaches to a given situation by the astrological world are not set in stone, but merely suggestions, which could be ignored as we learn our own inner nature and face the facts without bias towards any situation that we are placed within. A good place to start to understand consciousness and attitude would be with vibration. We've heard of a good vibration. It's a great song by the Beach Boys. Bad vibration could be a wheel on your car as you go down the highway and the lug nuts holding the wheels to the car are falling off because someone forgot to tighten them the last time new tires were installed. Vibration is usually sensed by one of the 5 senses. Sound is usually sensed by the ears. The sound of waves at the seashore, or birds at sunrise, a beautiful evening sonata, or just the gentle voice of the wind moving through the trees would be a good vibration, which, if experienced over time, would lead to an ascending attitude or a rising feeling in our emotions. The sound of a siren, fingernails moving across a blackboard, or someone shouting probably would lead to a descending attitude or a fall in our emotions. In the case of a loose wheel on our car, we might not sense the problem with our ears, but instead feel it, as it's transmitted into our bodies as we sit inside the car. Polarity of emotions. Now, at this point, we are interjecting emotions into attitude. So, therefore, we begin to see an interaction between ascending and descending attitudes and our feelings experienced via emotion. Then we introduce the next factor, and that is polarity. Polarity has 2 poles. One is positive, the other is negative. Positive attracts negative, and like poles repel. In the field of electricity, electrons move from the negative pole to the positive pole. Energy works much in the same way. People are usually attracted to positive energy. Likewise, they are repelled and pushed away by negative energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It is the fabric of consciousness. Energy follows thought, so, therefore, would it not be better to think positively than to think negatively? If you approach the situation involving another person, for example, would it not be logical to remove all forms of bias? Most of the time, this ain't easy. And approach that situation in a positive way. If it is indeed a negative person or a bad situation, and you cannot be clear without a neutral bias, then maybe you need to recharge your spiritual batteries until you can rise above the conflict. Looking now at a different polarity in a different level. For example, sound. Sound is usually harmonious or disharmonious. Our emotions follow in accord or discord. Sound is broken down into, for example, music. Music consists of 7 notes, A through G. If you look at each note as a vibratory correlation to 7 levels of consciousness, you begin to see and feel that there is a great possibility of music having a profound effect on your attitude and emotions. This effect may begin to have a greater or lesser impact upon you, depending on your clarity, which could also be affected by the levels of toxicity in your body. Within the topic of music, you can see the whole progression of a rise in consciousness upon the world since its beginning in time. Great composers, such as Mozart, Bach, Haydn, and others, influenced great inventors such as Tesla, Edison, and Ford. Great poets, philosophers, politicians, orators, and religious leaders are all highly inspired by music. In modern times, because of a general trend of negative emotion in this world brought on by souls who don't accept responsibility and live in a life of denial, negative music has come into play. In classifications such as punk rock, heavy metal, and downbeat, the music, when experienced by listeners, creates negative emotions. And energy being non-biased, as it follows the listener's thoughts, creates heavy drama, drug addiction, violent actions, and death. Qi affects consciousness. In the following chapters, we are not only going to be dealing with music, but also all forms of energy that affect our spiritual, emotional, and physical bodies. We are going to introduce another form of energy called the Qi force. Proper management of the Qi force in the body allows us to have greater control of the immune system, which affects consciousness, physical strength, and DNA. In a healthy body, the DNA replicates itself in a harmonious way so that the body reproduces cells at the rate of 50 million per second or greater. When the body is experiencing some form of internal or external disharmony, the cellular repetition rate drops, and therefore, we begin to experience a gradual loss of consciousness. If this process is severely interrupted, as in some form of accidental injury, consciousness will cause our body to go into shock or even death. Looking at harnessing the Qi force in a very powerful and positive way, we can look at a martial artist who is able to break bricks with his bare hands or perform some other feat that appears as though to demonstrate superhuman strength. Then there is the yogi, who practices meditation and is able to stop his heart for an extended period of time or exists in a sealed container for a period of many hours with no need for any sort of air supply. These types of feats are usually not of great concern to the average person, but understanding the underlying principles upon which they are practiced can make the average person have a much better than average life. I have been fortunate enough to work with many of these highly disciplined individuals and have learned the process by which Qi force demonstrates itself within their feats. From this knowledge, I have developed a whole series of external devices that, when coupled with properly administered attitudes, not only greatly enhance the immune system and the consciousness that goes hand in hand with it, but also allow the average person to have a transcendental or fourth-dimensional experience that they may find useful in their quest for spiritual freedom and understanding and a better life. I often ask people when I speak to them, what is better than a good feeling? So far, I have not received an answer that contradicts the question. When we move into dimensions slightly beyond the boundaries of daily life, and these motions are harmonious with natural law, enlightenment, in concert with a good feeling, is sure to be experienced. We have all heard of acupuncture or acupressure. Depending on the application, both methods achieve the same purpose: to unlock the Qi force that has become trapped in the body due to some force of trauma or stress. Immediately upon unblocking these trapped energies, pains, aches, tensions, and poor attitudes disappear as a gently blowing wind on our faces. We suddenly feel good again, and in some cases, laugh at ourselves as we realize where we are now. This sudden relief has yielded a good feeling. Now we can refocus and conquer the dilemma that brought us off the higher course. Energy follows thought. However, we still may not be aware of how we fell off the higher path. In life, in the daily grind, the path is quite easily lost and replaced with a busy boulevard full of souls that are traveling, basically nowhere, thinking to themselves that this boulevard has a purpose and a direction. If we were to take a higher view, we would see that many boulevards going in all directions and forming a maze that some might call a city, a nation, or the world. Because energy follows thought, and the people on the boulevard have a commonality of many thoughts, the thought form thus is quite rigid and challenging to remove from our individual thinking process. But in order to progress in consciousness, the thought form has got to go. In its place, instill a harmonious truth that will take us to the proper destination, where no boulevards ever go. Part of getting there is enjoying the trip. Every happy ending has to have a start. The process of beginning and ending something is the foundation upon which life is based. These comings and goings of ourselves progressing into different places begin to form a pattern, which then weaves itself into a garment that, in the future, we will clothe our spirits with. With the unlocking of spirit, we begin to see the dimensionality wherein spirit is practicing its lessons in life. Each step is a process that reveals, with a wider scope and breadth, another process. It is the beginning of our vision into the vastness of the true nature of the universe, both physical and spiritual. This revelation is not to be feared but only experienced. Each of us, as we understand it, will contribute to its greater depth and greater vastness of expression. Eventually, we begin to see the true holographic nature and structure of life itself. This can create amazingly good feelings. As we move into future chapters, we will study the origin of science as we know it today. For science to have reached this point in its journey towards infinity, the human sacrifice has had a great toll, as you will see. Then we will explore how, when science was presented for growth, harmony, and human longevity, dark masters, often under the guise of large corporations, led by greedy executives and entrepreneurs, have taken science and removed from it the true beauty and opportunities that would benefit all of humankind. Lies spread by worldwide media coverage, drug companies creating false melodies and drugging the life out of beautiful souls, poisons in the water and food supply, government implantation of tracking and control devices, electronic harassment, and useless, senseless wars over natural resources are just the tip of the iceberg. Once we understand the problem, the solution will present itself, and the rest will result in history. Each one of you out there will make a huge difference in the world outcome, as you soon shall see.